People who are dealing with chronic pain tend to talk about the old times when they didn't have the pain or the same problems before. That there was a time where they had no pain. When I was dealing with chronic pain for years, at the height of it, I also had those thoughts that, man, I never used to have these problems. But the truth is that I did have pain. It just was either way less intense or in different places, different ways. I had pain and problems, but back then, they just weren't disrupting my life. Later on, that wasn't the case. So in the past, whatever happened, I brushed it off. I found some stretches or exercises, pills, creams, whatever to make it go away. No big deal. I find something like this to be way more true for most people. The problem for me was that whatever that little pain or problem was, it would eventually come back in some way. And it wasn't until it started coming back with a vengeance that my emotions around it started changing too. That continued until eventually things became serious and I dealt with real injuries that completely disrupted my life. And those emotions eventually became deeper, depression, anger. Even though I could always find a way to fix them in the short run, they would always come back. And eventually, I couldn't see a way out. I was in a prison and it was limiting all kinds of things in my life at that point. And I created a story that I was broken and damaged, and I wondered if I would ever be able to fix this for good. And this of course is what led me to change my approach completely and shift away from all the traditional practices that led me to where I am now. But when I first started discovering posture and symmetry and changing my physical approach, I finally started noticing bouts of time where I felt somewhat normal again. But that normal feeling, it would not last forever, and I would eventually run into another flare-up. And it wasn't like the old days before my pain became chronic, where I would just brush it off or just go get it fixed. This time, I had a rush of heavy, dark emotions around it. And I mentally went right back to how this played out in the past. I had created this identity that I was broken and damaged, and that the pain, it would always come back just like it used to. And I was still in this prison for years. This happened until one day it hit me. And I became aware of the fact that I was heavily emotionally triggered. And I realized this because throughout this entire time, I was also a practitioner helping other people in fitness and through pain and injury. And I could see how much emotion was present for them. And it was only a matter of time that I would eventually see it in myself. I realized I was blinding myself from what was actually happening. The first 5 years of my downslide towards chronic pain, I would have ups and downs. I'd feel better and then worse. But over time, the worse got even more worse than before, which kind of looks like this. And even when I felt better again, I'd find that over time, my best was also not as good as my prior best. So fast forward to when I changed my approach, I finally noticed glimpses of me getting better in a different way. But I would still encounter these flare-ups. Because I was tied to the old story that I was broken, I could only see and feel the return of the worse and my flare-ups, completely missing the fact that I was on a new trend. I actually wasn't having as serious of flare-ups as before, but I was blind to this. I was looking for the pain literally just so I could say, see, there it is, I'm still broken. And I was jaded. And I was judging things subjectively with emotions, not objectively with facts. And when you're in the thick of something, it's hard to see what's going on around you. I'm speaking about all this now because I'm finally completely out of this pain cycle, and I can reflect back on all of this. I can also say I've watched hundreds of people go through this as I've helped them through this same kind of version of this cycle for them. Before I was ever broken, I felt like I was the one in control. And by control, I mean a state of mind that was empowered. I had optimism. But once I started to spiral, I decided I'm not in control and I needed someone else's help to come save me. This was a state of mind that was not empowered. It was more of a victim mentality. I talk about mentality because even though I did ultimately need a different physical strategy, that physical strategy alone wasn't able to take me out of my prison at the time. The prison was my mental state. The moment when my life truly changed was well after I had the new physical strategy with posture and symmetry. So it wasn't some kind of magic exercise or new sequence of exercises. It was me finally realizing that maybe I'm not broken anymore. Maybe I am getting better. It was me getting out of my emotional prison, which many people don't actually realize creates physical problems. Physiologically speaking, our brain and our nervous system are designed to protect us. And our thoughts, our stories, and experiences determine what our brain perceives as a threat. And it doesn't always do it in ways that serve us, like when you give a speech and your brain decides to make you feel like an absolute garbage can the entire week prior just to try to prevent you from giving the speech and embarrassing yourself, right? This is a nervous system response that actually creates a physical change in our body. So when we tell ourselves constantly that we are broken and injured and can't do this or that, when we have fear or anger on top of that, our brain actually creates a physical increase in tension to guard us from hurting things. And that tension actually disrupts our posture and our movement patterns, causing more pain. And remember that pain is just a signal from the brain. In this case, the signal isn't because we actually are injured, it's the brain trying to be protective. So when I had the story that I was broken and I knew in my mind what movements and positions would hurt, and I was always looking for the pain, I was actually creating a guarded tension response that made things worse. And when I changed my story and was able to look objectively at this process I was on, I saw it was actually working, and I lost a lot of the fear and the anger and the stress, and the protective tension response became less. And that's when I reached all new highs that I had never before. And to get this to work, I had to eliminate the expectation that just because I found something that was working, that I wasn't supposed to ever feel bad or have another flare-up again. Like, I had to learn how to objectively look at my progress. Ask different questions like, was I able to do more than I could in the past before a flare-up would come back? Was the flare-up less intense or just not lasting as long? You know, was the frequency of flare-ups less? I had to stop looking at things as binary or black and white and instead look at trends over time. So remember, when you are dealing with chronic pain, the story you have about it matters. Bring awareness to any heightened or triggered emotions that you have around it, or notice when you go looking for the problem just to prove it's still there. You may be essentially manifesting this pain back into existence. And you do need to have the right physical strategy to get better, but your mental state is equally important.